There are moments in a war when a single development quietly reveals something larger about the direction of the conflict. In recent days, Ukrainian forces carried out strikes against Russian air defense systems. These systems, positioned in areas connected to the battlefield, had been part of the network Russia relies on to monitor and protect its military activity. Air defense systems play a central role in modern warfare. They track aircraft, they monitor drones, they provide early warnings and protection against incoming attacks. For any military force operating in contested territory, these systems create a protective shield in the sky. But when those systems are disrupted or damaged, that shield begins to weaken. Ukraine's recent strikes were directed toward precisely those targets. Reports from Ukrainian officials indicated that Russian S-300 radar systems were hit during a series of operations. These radar installations serve as the eyes of an air defense network. They detect aircraft and track potential threats moving through the airspace. Without radar, the entire defensive structure becomes less effective. The operations were designed to strike those radar elements and reduce Russia's ability to monitor activity in the air above the battlefield. In conflicts where drones, aircraft, and long-range weapons play a constant role, the control of airspace becomes essential. The side that can see more clearly into the sky gains a significant advantage. The side that loses that visibility must operate with greater uncertainty. Ukrainian military officials explained that the strikes were aimed at weakening Russian defensive systems positioned near areas where fighting continues. These systems had been used to monitor and intercept Ukrainian aircraft and drones. By targeting the radar installations connected to them, Ukraine attempted to create openings in that defensive network. Such operations require planning and coordination. Radar systems are not simple targets placed alone in open spaces. They are often protected by additional military equipment. They may be positioned carefully to monitor large areas of territory. Striking them requires precise timing and accurate information. Ukrainian forces confirmed that their operations successfully hit several radar components connected to Russian air defense units. Alongside those strikes, ammunition depots connected to Russian military operations were also targeted. The combination of these actions had a clear purpose: reduce the effectiveness of the systems protecting Russian forces. At the same time, create conditions where Ukrainian operations in the air could become more effective. In modern warfare, battles do not happen only on the ground. They unfold above it. Aircraft move through contested airspace. Drones travel across long distances carrying reconnaissance equipment or weapons. Missiles move rapidly across the sky toward their targets. Each of these elements depends on the ability to monitor the airspace. Radar provides that visibility. When radar systems are damaged, the clarity of that picture becomes weaker. That is why air defense installations have become important targets throughout the conflict. For Ukrainian forces, striking those systems represents an attempt to reshape the environment in which the war is being fought, not only on the ground, but also in the sky above it. One Ukrainian military officer described the purpose of these operations in a short reflection that captured the meaning behind them. When their eyes disappear, the sky changes. Those words carried a quiet simplicity, but they describe the strategic importance of the moment because air defense systems are built to see threats before they arrive. When those systems are disrupted, the balance of visibility shifts. The operations carried out by Ukrainian forces were part of a broader pattern that has appeared repeatedly throughout the conflict. Both sides attempt to weaken the technological systems that allow the other to monitor and defend territory. Sometimes that effort focuses on communications equipment, sometimes on supply routes, and sometimes on the radar networks that watch the sky itself. The strikes against Russian air defense systems were one more step in that ongoing effort, a step designed to reduce the protection surrounding Russian positions and to create new conditions in the airspace where the conflict continues to unfold. For the people following developments in Ukraine, the announcement of these strikes represented another reminder that the war is not only fought by soldiers moving across fields and towns, it is also fought through technology, through radar signals moving invisibly through the air, through the ability to see or not see what approaches from the sky. And when those invisible systems are damaged, the effects ripple outward across the battlefield. As one Ukrainian serviceman quietly reflected after the reports of the strikes were confirmed, sometimes the most important battles happen where no one can see them. Those words echoed the nature of the moment, because the strikes on Russian air defense systems were not dramatic events visible to millions. But they were actions that could influence the shape of the war in the sky above Ukraine. When Ukrainian forces targeted Russian air defense systems, the operation carried consequences that reached far beyond the immediate impact of the explosions themselves. Radar installations and missile defense networks are not isolated pieces of equipment placed randomly across the battlefield. They are part of an organized structure. Each radar system connects to command centers. Each command center coordinates with missile launchers. Together, they form a defensive network that watches the sky continuously. This network allows Russian forces to track aircraft, detect drones, and identify objects moving across the airspace. Without that information, military commanders must operate with a much smaller view of what is happening above them. That is why air defense systems have become some of the most protected and important installations during the conflict. When Ukraine launched strikes against these systems, the goal was not only to damage equipment, the objective was to interrupt that network of awareness. If radar stations are damaged, the system's ability to track aerial movement becomes weaker. Missile systems that depend on radar guidance cannot operate with the same precision. Aircraft flying through the region may face less immediate detection. In practical terms, that means the sky becomes more difficult to control. Ukraine's strikes focused on Russian S-300 radar components, which are designed to detect and track aircraft across large distances. These systems form part of Russia's broader air defense architecture. They provide information that helps guide defensive missiles and alert military units to potential threats. Ukrainian officials reported that multiple radar systems connected to these defenses were successfully hit during the operations. The effect of these strikes was not limited to a single location. Because radar systems often monitor wide areas, disabling one installation can reduce the defensive coverage across a broader region. In the context of the war, that change can create opportunities. Opportunities for aircraft to move more freely, opportunities for reconnaissance drones to gather information, opportunities for further operations that depend on reduced detection. But achieving those results requires careful preparation. Air defense systems are rarely placed without protection. They are often surrounded by additional military equipment designed to defend them. Missile batteries, electronic warfare systems, ground forces positioned nearby. All of these elements create layers of defense intended to protect the radar equipment. For Ukrainian forces to strike these targets successfully, they must gather precise intelligence. They must identify the exact location of radar installations. They must determine the timing of defensive patrols. And they must coordinate the strike so that it reaches the target before defensive systems can respond. These operations involve cooperation between multiple parts of the Ukrainian military. Intelligence units identify targets. Commanders evaluate their strategic importance. Strike systems are then prepared to carry out the operation. The result is a carefully coordinated effort designed to weaken a specific component of Russia's military structure. In this case, that component was the air defense network monitoring large areas of the battlefield. Ukrainian officials also confirmed that ammunition depots connected to Russian forces were targeted during the same set of operations. Ammunition storage facilities support ongoing military activity. They provide the supplies needed for artillery systems, missile units, and other equipment used during combat operations. Striking these depots can reduce the availability of those resources and disrupt the logistical systems that supply frontline units. Together, the strikes against radar systems and ammunition depots formed part of a larger effort to weaken key elements supporting Russian military operations. Each target served a different function. Radar systems monitor the sky. Ammunition depots supply the battlefield, but both play roles in sustaining military activity across contested regions. When those systems are damaged, the impact can ripple outward through the broader structure supporting military operations. For Ukrainian forces, weakening these systems is part of the ongoing effort to defend their territory and reduce the effectiveness of Russian operations. Throughout the war, both sides have attempted to degrade each other's technological capabilities. Communications networks, radar systems, electronic warfare installations. Each of these elements contributes to the ability of a military force to operate effectively. Removing or damaging them changes the environment in which the conflict unfolds. The strikes against Russian air defense systems represented one example of that strategy in action. They were not intended as isolated events. They were part of a continuing effort to influence the balance of capability between opposing forces. From the perspective of Ukrainian defenders, these operations reflect the determination to challenge Russian military infrastructure whenever opportunities appear. Because the conflict is not decided only by numbers of soldiers or vehicles, it is also influenced by the systems that allow those forces to operate efficiently. When radar installations are destroyed, awareness is reduced. When ammunition depots are damaged, supply lines become strained. Each disruption forces the opposing side to adapt, and adaptation requires time and resources. One Ukrainian serviceman described the importance of these strikes with a brief reflection while discussing the effort to weaken Russia's air defense systems. He spoke calmly, choosing his words carefully. When the shield breaks, the sky opens. The meaning of those words was clear. Air defense networks exist to create a protective barrier over military forces. When that barrier is damaged, new possibilities appear for the side challenging it. For Ukraine, striking these systems represented an effort to shape the battlefield in ways that support the broader defense of the country. Even when the results are not immediately visible, the strategic impact can influence future operations. Because in modern warfare, control of the sky often begins with control of the systems that watch it. As the conflict continues across Ukraine, the strikes against Russian air defense systems reveal something important about the nature of the war itself. Wars are often imagined as clashes between large formations of soldiers moving across territory, armored vehicles advancing through fields, infantry units holding defensive lines, artillery firing across long distances. Those elements are still present in the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, but modern warfare also unfolds in ways that are far less visible. Signals moving through radar equipment, electronic systems tracking aircraft, drones scanning wide areas of land. Technology now plays a role that is as critical as the movement of troops on the ground. That is why radar installations and air defense systems have become central to the struggle for control of the battlefield. Russian forces rely on these systems to monitor large portions of the sky above the areas where fighting continues. They allow commanders to detect aircraft or drones long before those objects reach their targets. They provide warnings. They guide defensive missiles. And they help maintain awareness of what is happening beyond the immediate view of soldiers on the ground. When Ukrainian forces launched strikes against these systems, they were targeting that layer of awareness. Without radar, the ability to track movement in the air becomes far more limited. Without radar, defensive missiles cannot respond with the same precision. Without radar, the protective shield surrounding military positions becomes weaker. That reality explains why both sides in the war have repeatedly focused on destroying each other's monitoring systems. The contest for visibility in the sky has become a critical dimension of the conflict. In recent operations, Ukrainian forces struck radar installations connected to Russian S-300 air defense systems. These radar units function as the central sensors for those missile batteries. They scan the surrounding airspace and identify potential threats. The information they gather is then transmitted to command systems that coordinate defensive responses. Removing that radar capability reduces the system's effectiveness. It does not necessarily eliminate the entire air defense network, but it disrupts its ability to operate as designed. That disruption can create openings for reconnaissance, openings for future operations, openings that may alter the balance of capability within specific areas of the battlefield. The strikes carried out by Ukraine also targeted ammunition depots used to supply Russian military forces. Ammunition depots hold the resources required to sustain operations: missiles, artillery shells, equipment that supports defensive systems and offensive actions alike. When those supplies are destroyed or damaged, units relying on them must reorganize their logistics and seek replacements. This process takes time, and in a conflict where timing can influence outcomes, delays matter. For Ukrainian forces defending their territory, operations like these represent attempts to weaken the infrastructure supporting Russian military activity. Rather than focusing solely on direct confrontations between units on the ground, these actions aim at the systems that make those units effective. The radar networks, the supply depots, the technological framework that supports military operations. By targeting these elements, Ukraine seeks to create conditions that limit Russia's ability to maintain the same level of operational strength. Throughout the conflict, Ukrainian officials have repeatedly emphasized the importance of defending the country, not only through direct engagements, but also through strategic operations aimed at reducing Russia's capabilities. The strikes against air defense radar installations are part of that approach. They demonstrate the effort to challenge Russian systems wherever opportunities appear, and they reflect the ongoing determination within Ukraine to resist Russian military pressure. Behind these operations are the Ukrainian servicemen and servicewomen responsible for planning and carrying them out. Their work often happens far from public view. It involves intelligence gathering, operational planning, careful coordination between units responsible for reconnaissance, targeting, and execution. Each step must be performed with precision because the targets involved are often heavily defended. Yet the purpose behind these actions remains clear: to protect Ukraine, to weaken the system supporting Russian forces, and to maintain the ability to defend the country's airspace and territory. One Ukrainian officer reflected quietly on the significance of these operations after reports of the successful strikes emerged. He spoke without dramatic language, simply describing the reality faced by those involved in defending the country. "We defend the sky so the country can breathe." Those words captured the essence of the moment, because the struggle unfolding above Ukraine's territory is not only about aircraft and radar signals, it is about preserving the ability of the country to function despite the pressures of war. Each successful strike against Russian military infrastructure represents one small step in that ongoing effort. The conflict continues, operations unfold across different regions, and the contest for control of the sky remains a central part of the broader struggle. But the strikes against Russian air defense systems demonstrate that Ukraine continues to challenge the structures supporting Russian military operations, not only on the ground, but in the invisible network of technology that watches the skies above the battlefield.